Hey, how you going? This is the Harry Spiteri podcast, and I plan to take you with me into a conversation with someone I find interesting and talk to them about how it is they pass their time and pursue the things they want to pursue and avoid the things they don't want. The first interview is with Kathleen Jennings. She's a Brisbane-born illustrator and writer, and she's got a new book coming out called Fly Away. This conversation was at World Fantasy Con outside LA, just near the airport at LAX, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Recorded?
No, that's pretty good. All right, we're on now.
Great.
All right, Kathleen, welcome to the show, the
Thank you.
Harry podcast. Working title, Harryality.
Oh no.
But yeah, so I think you know the premise or the theme. We're just trying to figure out some, talk about your process mainly.
Excellent.
And yeah, so the starting is like, how do you start your day? Are there any rituals or commonalities, repetitive patterns that you find that you do to help get you in the groove for whatever it is you're working on that day?
I'm not a morning person. I like mornings, I approve
Yeah.
of them, but I find it very difficult to get any work done. I just tend to walk in circles indefinitely or read.
Yeah.
And so for me, I pretty much have to accept that and just try and get other things done in the morning and not beat myself up about it. And then by the time I get started, which is really midday, if I'm going to do creative work, I have to set a timer for half-hour sprints.
Oh, that's good. So it's
And
like that Pomodoro kind
A
of
bit like the
technique.
Pomodoro and
Yeah.
a bit because I have been a lawyer, so the concept of billable hours
Yeah.
is very familiar to me. And so I do try and hit a certain number of hours a day, but really it's more just to force myself to sit down. So if I'm typing, sit down and stare at the screen. If I'm drawing, sit down and stare at the drawing board. It's okay if I don't draw or type, but I'm not allowed to do anything else,
Yeah.
which is remarkably good at overcoming resistance because
Yeah.
I like being bored a lot less than I like actually doing the work. And once I can get started. And there's a few other almost Pavlovian techniques with certain work.
Yep.
I'll listen to mostly instrumental music
Yeah.
and often with headphones. If I do it with headphones, it gets to the point that I can put the headphones on and I'll
Accuse of
start
it.
working
Oh,
automatically
clever.
and then realize an hour later that I never actually hit play on the music.
Yeah. And so you said instrumental. Is that, would you use mainly instrumental for when you're writing versus illustrating?
Yes, instrumental
Yeah.
when I'm writing. Illustrating, it can be anything, but illustrating I tend to like to listen to a podcast.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
And I tend to listen actually to a lot of true crime.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Is there any particular ones that stand out?
I quite like My Favourite Murder.
Yeah.
But the reason I like My Favourite Murder, 99% Invisible, which is a great design podcast, and listening to a bit more of Let's Go to Court, and also This Podcast Will Kill You, which is a disease ecology podcast. And the reason I like all of those is that it's really always the same story. And I ran out of Midsummer Murder episodes. But it's really always the same story, and you're just listening for the differences. So if I were to listen to a book while I was working, I'd get sucked into the story.
Of course.
Whereas
yeah.
murder mystery, you just check in for the details of a structure that you already know.
Yeah, so is that like with, I've heard some people like listening to, say like a thematic kind of like maybe Star Wars if they're writing science fiction or space opera, or like maybe something more dramatic if they're trying to work out an emotional scene. Do you have a similar thing with your podcast for drawing or your instrumentals for writing?
Not really. I'd love
Yeah.
to listen to more than just murder, but the crime podcasts I listen to have a very particular chatty aesthetic, which I find good. A lot of the very well produced ones I find
Yeah.
overproduced. I feel like I have to listen to them closely. The weird thing is I can often look at a picture and remember what I was listening to at the time. So I'll look at a beautiful fairy tale picture and it's like, that was the guy who sued that dry cleaning company because they lost his trousers.
Oh, that's classic.
So
Yeah.
with writing, it really is just background noise. I have a couple playlists of sort of 18th century party mix, one of them is called, and a couple others. I do have some thematic ones very occasionally,
Yeah.
but mostly I don't need them.
Are you using Spotify or YouTube or yeah?
Predominantly Spotify.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back into listening to my CD collection, but I have to find a CD player again.
Yeah, they're becoming more and more rare. It's like the DVD player. Like I
Yes.
have like friends that have libraries of like fantastic movies and shows, and then you're like, oh, I've just bought like one for my laptop where I can use it. But yeah, CD players as well become more and more rare.
A friend just got a really little DVD player,
Yeah.
and it's so exciting. I go over to her place and visit, and we just watch DVDs from the old collection.
Yeah, yeah.
Very retro.
Have you ever
It's the new
tried
vinyl.
the new vinyl? Yeah, yeah. Well, that's like everyone. It's like chasing that just what left of center. Like, and it's always it gets centered, and then you got to go left of center again. Yeah.
Everything changes.
It does. It's like almost like Vogue. There's like certain things that goes around, it cycles. It's we're in the 1920s again, where we're listening to vinyl, and then you're like, comes along and CDs, cassettes.
And that's
Maybe.
the thing I love about reading recent and ancient history is that people are always people, and people will always use whatever technology is to hand to do the things they want to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I find hilarious. Like, I've got a book of, it's a sketchbook of a girl in the roughly Jane Austen era, around about 1815. Just her sketches of things her family did, and they've got hold of a little, I don't know what it's called, but essentially a little electrical generator.
Yeah.
And
the hand cranked
Yep.
kind of.
So someone's powering it, and then everyone else is standing on the landing in this big house in this little sketch,
That's
holding
epic.
hands, and one is touching it, and they're seeing how far the
current
electrical
can go.
shock. And this is like the era of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, but it's so human.
Yeah, and it's like that back. Everyone's your entertainment's derived by, I guess, the technology available,
Yes.
and you kind of you be creative with those things, and everyone's always trying to you find something and then
What
play
happens
with
if I
it.
touch this?
Yeah.
What happens if I push this button?
Well, I didn't find out about, because I've just kind of been studying a bit of mycology, just out of interest. There's like a particular mycologist I like called Paul Stamets. But yeah, he was kind of saying how most of the mushrooms that have been discovered as edible and culinary have only been figured out by just people eating them. So then you're like, there's that first definitely poison or definitely toxic.
As a species, it's a wonder we got this far.
Yeah, it's shocking. I guess it's a testament to the reproductive capabilities and just pure human
We
stubbornness.
learn from our mistakes.
Of course. Just, yeah. Someone's got to pay the price, I guess.
So we've digressed thoroughly into mushroom propagation.
Oh, yeah. I feel that's the best way. You zigzag and then come back to center. But yeah, kind of, also what I wanted to do is, I have like a cool tool section. So are there any particular tools you use, whether it's specifically related to your work, like obviously a computer or something for typing and drawing utensils? What are your your daily toolkit, and then are there any other sort of areas, either indirect or directly related to your work, that you find you use on a regular basis? So say like maybe you're looking for a CD player now, that could be one, but yeah.
So, daily basis, writing, I do a little bit of writing by hand, and I do enjoy it. I just don't enjoy typing it up. So,
Yeah.
mostly I write on the laptop, and really any program that comes to hand. I used to jot notes down in the draft section of my email and transfer them all later.
Yeah.
And then mostly I'll write in Word. And then when it actually gets time, when I can feel it catching,
Yeah.
which is usually 10 scraps that amount to 10% of the final word count, it's pretty consistent. I
Yeah.
can feel the idea catch, I'll usually transfer it into Scrivener, which I find very
Yes.
useful for just breaking it down and working on it in sections. That's the majority of it with writing. Occasionally I'll break out these index cards, but only with larger projects.
And just to be specific in the writing, so when you are using, say, your longhand, do you have any particular pens or markers, because you do have that artistic background?
Not very particular. I do tend to use a squared where did I put it?
Notebook.
Squared Moleskine notebook. And
yes.
I was just looking for the brand of pen, and a Pilot fine, particularly for that Pilot BPS GP fine point, because I draw very small, and I
Yeah.
use that for my just general diary and notes. So often I'll do a bit of handwriting in there. If I'm actually sitting down deliberately to do some writing, I tend to use a exercise book and quite a thick pen, because I know with a really
Yes.
narrow barrel pen my hand will get cramped. With art though,
Yeah.
I will draw with anything, on anything. So I'll use that same pen in my sketchbook for early ideas, just little scribbles. If I'm sitting in a cafe, manage to get myself off the internet. My biggest tool is probably freedom for getting myself off the internet. To shut it off.
Do you have any strategies for that, or do you just shut the lid and you're like,
it's an app and program called Freedom, which lets you block out social media or the entire internet.
Yeah.
Sometimes the only way I can get off the computer is by blocking off the entire internet, and suddenly I'm like, well, why do I even want to be on the computer? And I'll go off and read. So I find, because as an artist or a writer, you're often trying to get in the flow. You get very good at that, but it also means you can get in the flow very easily of other things. So I can fall into drawing and not come up for several hours, but I can also fall into the internet and not come up for several hours. So I do need ways to get out of that.
Yeah, so there's that probably quality that has led you to produce some great stuff, but there's also a bit of a curse. Yeah.
And I used to have a rule at college, residential college for Americans, when I was at university.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with a television set just because there was no reception where we lived. And I just remembered falling into like 6 hours of Buffy rewatches or something. And suddenly realised I'd lost that 6 hours, and I had a rule after that I couldn't watch television unless I was doing something practical with my hands.
That's clever. Yeah.
But that doesn't work with the internet.
Of course, yeah.
So still trying to work out some workarounds there. But it's so useful, and there's interesting things, and that's where I get ideas and share stuff with people. So I'm not going to go cold turkey. I just have to stop for a couple hours now and then.
Recalibrate and get back to it kind of thing.
Yes. And then, so I'll scribble in the same notebook for general ideas. I carry around I make little accordion fold sketchbooks, but just strips of paper folded.
I think I've seen you. So when we caught up at Continuum, I think you had one of those, and you were...
So I have a tiny little zippered pencil case with the folded paper in there, and a pencil, a propelling mechanical pencil.
I love those.
Sharpen things.
Yeah. Do you have any particular brands? Because I got... There was a good Papermate one I used to use that was like a 0.5. It was like a thinner lead, but now I can only sort of at, Woolies or the supermarket find the 0.7s, but they're just not as... You don't get that quite as good detail.
I think it's HB is the hardness I use. 0.5, yes. I think it's a Pentel pen, sort of a silver metal one, which I quite like. I keep losing it, but it always comes back. And I'll use those little notebooks when I'm working out ideas, because I can just keep doing them, and then I'll stick them all together. So even at the end, if I get rid of old sketches or sell the originals, I'll have this object which contains all of the thumbnail sketches for a project. It could sometimes it's like 6 meters long if I stick them all together. It looks quite spectacular.
They do, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And then when I'm actually creating art, I will use pen and ink, which is a Hunt Crowquill 102 nib. Very particular.
Very nice, very nice.
With the handle, and then a bottle of Winsor & Newton black ink.
Yeah.
And I'll ink with that. I quite like, I think it's a Canson 250 GSM paper. Or I'll do cut paper, which is just black paper if I can find it, and a thin craft knife blade.
Yeah. And
lately I've been doing a bit of inking with a brush, learning how to have more control with that for the fine lines, and imitation gold leaf, which has been a lot of fun. Yeah,
they're looking good, especially like when paired with the black.
Thank you. I really love the way it looks. And I'll also do a bit of scratchboard, which is essentially ink, all of the above tools, ink on a gesso or clay board, and then you scrape it back with a craft knife or with the specialty tools, and then Photoshop and Inkscape on the laptop.
Yeah.
To tidy things up and add a bit of colour.
Yeah, and obviously I guess when you have to send it in and get it put on the book, the cover of a book, or when you did The Wind in the Willows.
Yes, I did the colour on that was digital. But I'm trying to do more physical colour as well, so I really like Daniel Smith watercolours is the brand. Beautiful colours.
Have you worked much with watercolours? Because I've heard they can be quite a frustrating...
They can, but I think any medium can. If I was trying to do entirely watercolour pictures, I think I would struggle, but I use them more as a bit of spot colour. And I love I feel freeness is not the word I'm looking for, but and freedom isn't it either. I love the...
Spontaneity, maybe?
Spontaneity and the liquidity of it.
Yeah.
And the happy accidents, which is also why I like cutting the silhouettes out by hand rather than doing stuff digitally. And I like having a physical object. but I've got a piece that might have sold. I did have one little watercolour piece down in the art show.
Yeah.
And I was looking at a close-up scan of it and just the blotches and the edges, and you can replicate that digitally and get that effect. But you have to work really hard, and it takes a long time. If you're working on the drawing tablet, drawing into the computer, you never blink. Whereas with watercolour, you're just like, oh, I went over an edge. Oh dear, oh, here's some colour spots. I'll add a bit more of that. It
adds to it, yeah.
And I enjoy that, so.
Yeah, I guess it's a more romantic experience.
It is, and it's just, only you get to close your eyes, it's more comfortable. And it's faster, so much faster.
Yeah.
Digital takes a while.
Yeah.
But I will use it to, like if I do a cutout silhouette, I'll scan it in and then I'll use Inkscape to turn it into a vector program, clean up the edges, make it really solid black, clean edges, but still keep all the variation. It just makes it easier to reproduce.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and have you found that transition to be an enjoyable process? Obviously, you seem to enjoy experimenting with different mediums like the gold leaf, and that is that kind of always some way to keep that the act of making visual art fresh and entertaining or interesting?
It does have that effect. It's probably not the way I think through it. I quite like getting distracted. So with doing Inktober, when I was doing the gold leaf and ink for that challenge, I really like monthly challenges because if I'm incredibly stressed, I always think it's a good idea to add on an extra project. And that project, as well as being ridiculously over-involved and an everyday commitment while I was frantic, meant that I got to finish something every day, which is a huge psychological boost. So it was actually the act of making a thing every day in between trying to prepare for an art show, trying to write a journal article, all of these other things. But also the creative process, not necessarily of the ink and gold leaf, but of taking a prompt or two prompts and a limitation has to be an ink, and I wanted to do the gold leaf, and then combining those. I find the more prompts and restrictions I have, the easier it is to come up with story ideas. So if you go, I think the first one was ring, and it was the suitor met the stag in the woods.
Yeah, cool.
Line, deep dark woods line from, it's just a Twitter bot that generates lines that look like they should come from fairy tales. And suddenly it's this story of, well, and then the other limitation of the ink. So there's certain poses that you can't do and actually have any, because I'm doing silhouettes. And have any idea what's going on. So everyone has to be in profile or turned in a certain way, and how to manage that. And suddenly it's a story of people who go into the woods to get wedding rings from a stag that roams around with the rings hanging from its horns. And I've since written actually it turned into a horror story about that, or other ones where, you know, the baker's boy read in the deep dark woods and it's a legend. You're like, what is he reading? What's watching over his shoulder? All of this. But again, it's really hard to draw people reading effectively in silhouette.
Oh, of course, because it's just the body would block out the book. Do you side profile or
side profile? But then books look weird from certain angles, or they don't look like a book, or you could just be holding a rectangle. So playing with all of that was quite a bit of fun. So I think it's less about the experiment. The experiment happens around the storytelling. So by the end of the month, it's like, I love this. Everybody else seems to love it. Turns out everyone's an 8-year-old girl at heart. They really like shiny things.
We all do, right? It's like a human thing. Even that, certain movies of, I think I was watching Moana, and they have the crab. It does that shiny. And you're like, oh, it's so fun to look at those popping kind of colours and the jewels, and I guess it's that natural thing to want to collect treasure and you know, find things.
But the experiment itself at the same time was really just a progression from things I'd done before. I work in silhouettes, I work in ink. I've played around with the gold leaf in the past. So it was just that commitment to do a month. And earlier in the year I did a challenge which was mermaid. We draw a mermaid every day. And that wasn't as deliberately just one technique, but it developed into trying to do a lino cut mermaid every day.
Wow. So just to get those use of the scalpel.
Get the use of the skills up. And it means that your focus isn't on, I have to work out how to get this picture right, I have to work out this technique. It's like, I just have to draw a mermaid today. Anything it takes. Different style every day. And by the end you learn so much because you're actually concentrating on the parlour game, thrill of the chase. Competitive without rules, which is
process,
really my So process over product, as they say.
That's it. Yeah, so because one of the things I'm hoping to ask people is a lot like just in that endeavour where it's very much, you make the best version of the thing you're going to make, and then it's received by however people want to receive. So you don't really have much control over the reception of your work. So it does lead to a lot, I think, of anxieties or stress. So yeah, just the mental health component. Like you've said, obviously having those little daily challenges help manage a bit of that. So do you have any things other than that you find you do on a regular or semi-regular kind of schedule that help with that, keeping sane in the chaos of creating stuff?
I think a few of them I've mentioned before. So having something that you can finish quickly and having something that's meant to be bad. I have a friend, I often set her a task, like, can you please just go away and draw an ugly pigeon? You need to finish something and it needs to not be good.
I like, because the pigeon is quite a scraggly kind of animal as well. So.
And if you say ugly, it's like, people are like, I'm trying to draw the perfect pigeon. I was like, that was not the job.
You missed the mark, yeah.
So do something, anything, and getting a lot of small bad stuff out is great for morale. And something in there might well be good. You won't know until someone else tells you, but at least you're getting it out rather than putting all your weight on one project. Getting off the internet periodically, even if it's just for an hour or two, and getting some work done, I find very helpful.
Yeah.
You just, partly because of the falling in and partly because you do get caught up. It's like being in a conversation, very intense conversation with one person for 24 hours.
Yeah.
It's just not healthy for anybody. You can still have good conversations periodically with people.
Or a conversation with a big group.
Yes.
For 24 hours where you're just like, you're the center of attention kind of thing. You're like, too much, yeah.
I find looking at a lot of material by other people can be useful.
Yep.
So if I'm trying to write short stories, reading a lot of short stories by other people, you're like, there's so many ways to do it. That can backfire. I also, and this sounds incredibly cynical, but I will go and look at works by my absolute favourite artists and specifically look for things they got wrong or did badly.
Yeah.
Like if there's an artist I know who's bad with hands, I was like, see?
Yeah.
Anyone can do this.
Anyone can do it.
Call himself an expert. It sounds cynical, but it is actually
it's
a good reminder.
Yeah, and it's kind of a humanising aspect of, because you're seeing something in its final iteration.
Yes.
You're seeing the best version that the artist thinks they can put forward, and then you don't get to see where it was, a weird abstract thing that looked remotely like an oven mitt.
And getting the chance to see people's work in progress is very helpful, because I've read some articles which had Quentin Blake's process in it.
Yeah.
And I got to handle some of Arthur Rackham's sketchbooks.
Cool.
And it's like, I'm not Quentin Blake. I'm not Arthur Rackham. Yeah. I admire them and I work in very similar spaces and some similar techniques. But seeing their practice bit, you can see the bit where you're like, oh, that's exactly how I do it. Or I know what thinking process he's using here. And that's quite reassuring, because it's like, no, it's okay, we're part of the same continuum. But the other, I can't remember who gave me this advice, but it was, because you have to let things go. And it's very easy to go, oh, that's terrible. And it's easier as an artist to get suddenly confronted with your old work. As a writer, you might have your old stories lying around, but you have to actively choose to read them again.
Yes.
As an artist, you walk around a corner in a bookstore and suddenly there's something you drew 10 years ago. Like,
Such a high bandwidth communication. It just gets in.
So it was to start saying that was a good job for Kathleen in 2009.
And you'd have to treat your past self.
Yeah.
Because I've always thought there's three yous. There's the past you, the current you, and then the you to be.
Yes.
Which is like, and you got to try and have a good relationship with all them.
Ghost of future past.
Yeah, it's like a Dickens. We're all living a Dickens novel.
And part of that, just being able to say, well, that's done. Because so often you only learn how to do it well by doing it at all.
For sure.
So the next job, you'll know how to do they say you always fight the last war.
Yeah.
So that aspect I find very helpful, just being able to go, well, that was a really good job for October 29, Kathleen.
Yep.
November 29, Kathleen has some new challenges. Or even, well, that was a good job for 11 a.m. Kathleen.
Yeah.
12 a.m. Kathleen has seen some things.
Yeah. She's a different girl. Yeah. Yeah, and it is that, as you said, like, you're not a morning person to get your creative work
I'm very
done.
cheerful.
But but you can, there are other aspects. So, and there is that balance between, maintaining a healthy social life. As humans, we are very social.
Yes.
And if you don't kind of address that or ignore it for too long, it can be troublesome.
And I actually find not being a morning person one of the bigger difficulties, because people socialise in the evenings. Bookstore events are in the
Yes.
evenings. And that is my most productive time, but also I really like people.
Yeah.
So having to do, lately I'm like, I have to take 2 days a week where I am not allowed to set up anything. I'm not allowed to contact people. Ideally, I don't even leave the house to go to the cafe.
Yeah.
And one of those days, I pick one project and I'm not allowed to do anything else. I can do that project. I can sit and stare at that project. I can lie on the floor and stare at the ceiling.
Yeah.
If I stop work in the evening, I can read books associated with that project. So it's just 1 day a week where it's completely dedicated. The other day, I'm just not allowed to go out,
For sure.
work on anything, slack off, whatever. But I just need a couple days where
Yeah.
because
yeah, very hyper focused.
it's very easy to talk into doing things when I should be working.
And that's the hardest thing about working to like a creative or I think I've heard it described as a maker's schedule. You don't have those kind of like external forces that are like you're not in the office potentially. So people are just like, oh, Kathleen, she's done all her work already. She's had 24 hours, you know.
Yeah.
She's surely done like all the stuff in the other hours that I don't want to do stuff with her with. So she should come out now and
Yes.
have a coffee. Yeah.
But a lot of them are makers as well, so we're just distracting each other. But the difficulty is like at some point you have to acknowledge that we live in a society.
Yeah.
I have, and even just the creative community, I want to see people and I need to make some allowances for the fact that, like I did for a very long time, like I still do when I'm teaching, you have external requirements. So most people's socializing will happen in the evening.
Yeah.
So rather than railing against that or being just angry that I'm not getting any work done because I'm always out partying,
Yeah.
I've sort of made that compromise of 2 days, nothing else on.
Yeah.
Go for my life on the other days, and I can work on my morning habits on those days.
And do you try and structure that kind of outside of peak social? Like, would you do that midweek? You'd have those 2 days ideally, or do you kind of...
Depends a little bit on the schedule. I try and make it sort of like Monday and Thursday to fit in with a couple of other things around
Nice.
then. But if I'm teaching or if I've got a
Yeah.
workshop or something, I'll shift it.
So I was going to say, just for a background for anyone who might be listening,
Do you want to record an introduction at the end of the
yeah,
podcast?
I will, yeah. But in terms of your teaching, so you work both in Australia and in the UK teaching?
Only teaching, well, I go to the UK and the US occasionally, but for work, as in
Yeah.
for the for art and
For
writing,
art, yeah.
and also for academic conferences.
Yeah.
But at home, I'm casual academic, sessional academic tutor. Anyway, I'm a class tutor for a couple subjects at the University of Queensland.
Yeah.
Unless it's a semester when I particularly want to be out of town and it clashes with the teaching. Part-time tutoring, sessional teaching arrangements, all of that. It's a terrible situation. It's getting worse for a lot of people. It just happens to rather suit me because I really should be spending more time doing art, but I like talking, I like teaching, I like being around people talking about ideas, I like being on campus, I like having a desk there. So
there is a certain something about that environment that's got a very sort of village aspect to it, a very kind of...
Yes.
It's kind of like a Hogwarts kind of...
And I spent, thanks to John Birmingham's book, He Died with a Falafel in His Hand, about the Brisbane share housing scene in, was it the 90s? I read that when I was still living at college at university, and I decided to spend my entire, substantially long undergraduate degrees living on campus at university. So it was after 2 years of boarding school doing that. So I essentially had 9 years living in an institution. I'm pretty well institutionalized, and I really like that aspect of go into your room, close the door, work, open the door.
Everyone's there.
There's people there. 'Cause it took me a year or two after leaving college to work out how to have a social life again, because you actually have to go contact people and make an effort.
It is quite strange that when you have those certain things that you take for granted, whether it's environmental or work related or something, where it does put you in those situations where you do have quite a, you know, a robust and rigorous social life just built into what you're doing. But then because a lot of the stuff you do is solo pursuits for the bulk of the work. Yeah, if you don't actively seek out those things, then you're kind of like, I spent 6 months kind of with say hello to the barista, and that's about it. Yeah.
So, and I get a little keyed up around people.
Yeah.
So conventions are great.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah.
But I also have to remember, don't try and get anything done if I'm going to be around other people, because
you can't. Yeah.
I work in cafes a lot because I have a terrible fear of missing out.
Yeah, me
and I
too.
don't like being shut up in my house and not seeing the world go by. And I
Yeah.
don't have a balcony in my house, so
Yeah.
I can't look out at the street and watch the neighbours. I go to a cafe, and it's like I can keep an eye on everyone else and make sure they're not having too much fun without me.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. And then it's like quick access to the coffee. It doesn't
Yes.
interrupt things. Just like, oh yeah, another
Perfect.
tea.
They know me.
And do you drink, like, just on terms of
Tools.
yeah, tools again. Do you use any regular, whether it's caffeine, alcohol,
Speed.
speed,
No.
that Adderall that's so popular in journalist culture now?
Someone asked me once, said, Kathleen, can I ask you a personal question? I'm like, sure. He's like, I'll just go away and think of it. I said, no, actually, do you do speed? I was like, I drink a lot of tea.
It's caffeine, I get excited.
Yes. So
Yeah.
just caffeine. I get headaches if I stop now. I used to
Me
be
too.
purely a tea drinker, not a coffee drinker, until I became a lawyer, and then really had to switch to coffee, and never quite got off it. I love
Tea.
I love tea, but I quite like American style brewed coffee.
Yeah.
Partly because you can drink more of it. Sometimes you just don't want a large cup of hot milk. Sometimes you just want the
Exactly.
caffeine. So I'll
Yeah.
put on, if I'm working at home and on the days that are fully at home, I've got a coffee brewing setup, which is...
Just the aroma's
Yes.
quite...
It's very nice.
Yeah.
I do confess to using a caramel scented one.
Ah,
It's
clever.
not sweetened, it's just
Yeah.
Gloria Jean's caramel infused.
Yeah. Brand name,
And
tools.
but the pot is insulated, so it stays. I don't require scalding coffee, so it stays drinkably warm for like
Yeah,
10
yeah, yeah.
hours. So I'll make that in the morning and just keep.
Do you know the machine
Chocolate.
name by chance?
No, it's
It's
one
Breville,
of the.
Breville or something?
It's
No.
one of the standard ones. I can't remember
Yeah.
the name. I got it for a Christmas present. I'm trying to visualize it. It could be Breville,
Yeah.
it could be Harris, it could be
Sunbeam, whatever.
Sunbeam. It's
Anyway.
black. It has the advantage of not being able to break the pot as well.
Yeah, that is like the blender dilemma. You know when it used
Yeah.
to be all glass blenders? And you'd break it, and you'd be like, well, I guess I'm getting a new blender. Like,
If there's any coffee
Yeah.
left over after, you just pour it into a cup and microwave it in the morning. You can't do that with the large. Well, you can do that with
yeah. I had a terrible incident with that at my sister's engagement party with a fresh pitcher of espresso martini. Like, bought it, I was, yeah,
No.
definitely went down like a lead balloon.
But I do find, especially with weird social hours,
Mhm.
too much coffee, there's a few things, and, you know, being responsible for feeding myself,
Mm-hmm.
there's a few things I have to keep in mind. So if I'm tired, if I'm grumpy,
Yeah.
if I'm... there's a checklist now. How much coffee... have you had coffee? If it's a headache.
Yes.
How much coffee have you had?
Yeah.
Have you had any protein? It's a little checklist like that.
Yeah,
And
when was the
also-
last time I ate?
Yes. And if it's like gets to a certain hour of the day and I'm grumpy and depressed and everything's terrible, I know I have to stop thinking, stop working, either go to bed
Yeah.
or go watch a movie in the cinema where you can't do anything else at the same time with a lot of explosions in it.
Yeah.
So, and just so as far as that mental health aspect,
Yeah.
I know, and I have enough executive function remaining at that point just to go, okay, stop. It's late enough to just go to bed. Sleeping's allowed. Turn off completely somewhere where you can't feel, where you can feel guilty about being in the cinema, but you can't do anything about it. So why
Yeah,
bother?
exactly.
So, yeah.
So do you take a lot of those things for certain aspects of your life? So say like with the cafe, you're locked in, you know, you can't really, especially if you're not there with a friend, there's no one else really that's you can talk to or distract yourself with too much. And then the cinema, same thing, you're winding down, so you found an environment that's conducive to
Yes.
that. Do you find that's like you just put yourself in those things to get the result that you're kind of
Pretty much. I think if,
chasing after? Yeah.
especially creative people, you train yourself to look at everything, notice everything,
Yes.
recombine things, magpie brain, and sometimes to actually do something with all the stuff you've collected, you have to pull in the blinkers, but isolation itself can be distressing.
Yeah.
So ways to do that: cafe, movies, and even reading and so forth. And watching movies and things that I want to see, there's times and places. Like if I'm on an aeroplane, I finally learned I'm never going to do any work. Don't try and do any work, but I can watch horror movies on a plane, which I can't anywhere else because I'll
Yeah.
I either need to be dragged to the cinema by someone who does not mind me climbing up their arm,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
or watch it on a plane because otherwise I'll just get up and go do dishes and everything gets stressful.
Yeah, I'd turn the volume down. We were talking about this yesterday. It's like the movie, like, you don't have those loud screaming
Creepy.
or violent sounds.
I was trying to watch something creepy at a friend's house, but she had the subtitles on. I was like, I appreciate you can get used to them, but for me, if I'm watching a movie and there's a weird creaking door sound, something in the background, like, was there something in the background? Is something going on? Which I find very creepy, but if it says weird creaking door sound, I'm like, oh, it's okay, it's meant to be happening.
Yeah.
So
that's a good method. Maybe I could try that to like ease back into the horror watching.
Playing is good. You can't get away and nothing can get you.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good thing. Like apparently, a lot of people say they don't like to watch sad movies on planes because they find, I don't know, they're in like maybe a more heightened emotional state, so they get you a bit more.
Cried so much watching Paddington 2 on the plane to England.
Apparently it's fantastic as a movie.
It was really interesting watching Hugh Grant in it. I enjoy Hugh Grant's acting, but he does definitely play a certain subset of character usually, although I do recommend people watch The Lady and the Highwayman, the Gainsborough film production of a Barbara Cartland Restoration era romance starring a very floppy-haired, very young Hugh Grant as the Highwayman in question. But watching him in that do a role which I'm pretty sure was having a go at Kenneth Branagh, especially when he keeps going in and out of... He's an older actor who's had this great career, and he sits in his attic and talks to himself in the persona of his different greatest roles. But it's people like Poirot and Macbeth and all these roles. And it just feels very Kenneth Branagh-y. But you're watching him do all of this and going, he's really good.
Yeah.
We've been robbed. Why haven't we had Hugh Grant doing Shakespeare?
Yeah.
It's quite odd watching him playing that serious a role as well.
Yeah, because you normally see him like Love Actually, where he's playing the British Prime Minister in a very quirky sense. And
I enjoy watching him, but...
Yeah.
So,
nice.
All
right, so I've got to obviously get you out of here so you can go take your panel, which is Fairy Tales.
Jack Zipes is on it, and
yeah,
I know that authors and illustrators are real people.
Yeah.
But I hadn't quite realised that Jack Zipes and academics of his ilk were
There's
also people
one.
You could just run into at a conference.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit... Jack Zipes, he's real, he's here. Didn't know he was a person you could just meet.
Yeah. It's a really sort of weird, humanising, and then you look at him, you're like, it almost feels strange. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But I guess we'll, let's talk about your, so you've got a novella coming out with Tor.com.
I do, next year, well, depending on when you release this. I do have a novella coming out, July 28, 2020.
Yeah, with the Flyaway's the...
Flyaway is the title of it, and it's...
What can you tell us without giving away too much?
Without giving away the story. It's a very convoluted story, so it's fairly easy not to spoil it.
Lovely.
It's called Flyaway. It's an Australian Gothic novella.
Yeah.
I think it's a fairy tale novella. It's not a fairy tale novella.
Yeah.
It has a lot of mechanisms that in my head belong to that class of story, but it is very much Australian Gothic. I've been instructed by several people that it is in fact a literary horror. I'm like, people keep saying my writing's horrible, but I think it's pretty. And set in Western Queensland in the late 90s.
Cool.
Not based on where I grew up, but definitely inspired by a lot of the sights and sounds and stories from where I grew up about a girl who discovers that her history as she remembers it is perhaps not quite what happened, and that there are stranger things in the bush than she entirely realised were there.
Yeah. No creaking sound subtitles on that one.
No, there are definitely creaking sounds, however, and I wrote a scene in an abandoned sawmill, which is based on an abandoned sawmill, or an old sawmill that was on a little bit of land that was excised out of the corner of the cattle property that I grew up on.
Yeah.
And I went back there a year or two ago and drove out by myself, climbed the fence and walked down. But because I'd just been working on this passage, which is really creepy, I entirely freaked myself out as a result of going to a place that I'd just been writing about as frightening in a book. It's like, this isn't good. I've read enough true crime to know this is a bad idea. And it has illustrations or ornaments by me in it, cut paper silhouettes.
Oh, so that's all mixed in.
All mixed in. So
very nice.
There's a lot of stories within the story. So they all have a square silhouette illustration, and then every chapter has a bird or a cut paper.
I love those kind
grace
of
note.
Ornaments, yeah. And it did seem to be more of a thing back like in the earlier like science fiction and fantasies, where you would even get those nice chapter title illustrations and that, and then so
it's
I'm
something
looking forward to reading it.
Thank you. It's something I would love to see more of. I appreciate production-wise and cost-wise, and the drive for cheaper books. Yeah. It's difficult, but also there's a lot more scope for beautiful books now. if you're going to print a physical book, why not make it look good?
Yeah.
And I think more books should have that. And I've done some YA books with chapter headers and custom dingbats and dividers that are thematically connected to the book for a number of people, and in older YA work. And I'd love to see more of that in just regular novels.
Especially when you do have that, like a print medium, there is always, because it's so tactile, and
it's a chance to make it beautiful or memorable or horrific, if the case may be. End papers, illustrated end papers. Cool. I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on I guess while we're on the writing topic, audiobooks, your relationship with audiobooks. Do you listen to them? Do you try to sort of do most of your reading in print or Kindle, or how do you get your art? I'm guessing. How do you get your literature in? Yeah. I prefer print.
Yeah.
I find it easier to navigate because it's a three-dimensional space. You can flip back and forth and roundabout.
Yes.
Keep your fingers in it. Compare stuff. I just like that tactile aspect. I do read ebooks either for ease or because I can't get hold of something in time, or certain what I call popcorn books, which is not judgmental at all, but there are books which are very small, very fast comfort reads, and I require them faster than I can get them from the bookstore or the library. So if I'm reading, Hamish Macbeth or something like that, I'm like, more now.
Get snacky.
Yeah, and it is great having access to ebooks from the library as well as buying them academic things that you just need to have handy and searchable. I own quite a lot of duplicate books in ebook, not to replace my hard copies, but just so that I can look up references quickly. Books that I read out loud to my dad, I'll carry around that way. So Tom Sawyer, Pride and Prejudice, mostly Pride and Prejudice, almost entirely Pride and Prejudice. It's my dad's favourite book, and a few others.
It's a good taste.
Yeah. Audiobooks, I don't love. I don't dislike, but I don't like having anyone else's view put on a story, and sometimes the readers emphasise things that I wouldn't emphasise in my mind. But I do enjoy them.
Yes.
But I do listen to them, especially if I have a lot of reading to do, if I need to get on top of some books for a subject I'm teaching, if I need to refresh my memory. And that's the thing I actually love it for, is rereading. And especially rereading 19th century novels, because my favourite novel is Charles Dickens' Our Mutual Friend.
Yeah.
It's an enormous book.
Yeah.
And I know if I go back and reread it physically, which I do, it's very easy just to skim. I know what's happening is you're just skim reading, but it's not the sort of book that is written to be skim read. Like every sentence contains wonders and little side stories and universes. So having it on audiobook forces me to listen to every line. And in fact, there's one scene in Our Mutual Friend which I always skipped over. I always found it a bit cloying and ridiculous. Being forced to sit through the whole thing, I was like, it was none of those things. I suffer terribly from secondhand embarrassment for people. And it's not actually an embarrassing scene, it's just an incredibly human family dinner scene. If you're forced to sit through it, it is cumulatively hilarious and more human. And the way the family teases each other, and the way the oldest daughter's like, this isn't a Dickens novel, she's come home to visit, she's going to, for her parents' anniversary dinner, and she's going to cook them dinner, but she's not actually good at cooking, so the dad keeps having to get up from the table and go, like, she's like, oh, that's unusual. Maybe there's just this breed of chicken is pink inside, and Dad has to go and finish the cooking and go back. And in this Victorian novel, it's charming, and being forced to sit through it is delightful. So I've been doing that. And same with Ovid's Metamorphosis. I've been reading for the first time that way, actually, because it sort of overcomes a bit of resistance that I had to sitting down and working through it at the risk of skimming parts. So... And you know it all. You've been I've probably read the Roger Lanson Green version or something, and just being sat down and made to listen to something, mostly while I'm driving. Except Ovid is like the most wonderful stories, and then the most terrible stories, and some of the descriptions are just like, it's Quentin Tarantino-esque. So you're sitting in traffic, driving to uni or something, and you're just like. And you realise that one of the other cars is looking at you. Well, sorry, no one can see the face I just pulled. Oh my goodness, this is quite graphic for a book. So I do it. I enjoy them and use them, but my default is, and if I enjoy a book on audiobook or ebook particularly,
Go
I'll
back
pick
and
it up.
yeah.
But also, I'm in a Georgette Heyer book club, which is the best sort of book club. Everyone already likes the author, and most of us have already read the books.
Ah, perfect.
But to refresh my memory, I'll download it.
Audiobook.
I usually listen to them a little bit faster because I don't. Older books aren't written to be read as audiobooks, so that they're a bit different. Dickens works really well, but a lot of them it just feels very slow. Yeah. So I listen to them at a faster speed.
And then it kind of gets that rhythm a bit better. Yeah, and it probably keeps a bit more speed with your natural reading pace. Yeah.
Though it is something interesting to keep in mind because in a written book, the word said is invisible. But in a spoken book, you can hear every time it's said.
Yeah, because you naturally just start filtering them out when you're... Yeah, because you...
Yes.
Interesting. I never thought of that.
Which is good to know. I think if I were ever to be narrating my own work or something, I'd see if I could edit it a little bit for audio.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily want to listen to an edited audio book. Depends why you're listening.
Does anyone do that already?
Some do.
Yeah. Because I guess especially if you had a very distinct voice actor, you could play around with that more. Yeah, we'll get you out of here soon. Just to finish up, thank you very much for coming on.
You're very welcome.
And where can people find more about you, social media handles, and a little bit about your short story that people can read for free on Tor.com.
Yes. Yeah. So, the short story is The Heart of Al Abbas. The Heart of Al Abbas.
Yeah.
I wrote it, so I hadn't worked out how I wanted to pronounce it. Everyone does it differently. So The Heart of Al Abbas on Tor.com. And it's a short, very odd baroque kind of little short story.
Very poetic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed writing it, and I enjoy reading the responses from people because some go, it's interesting, it's very wordy, it's not my sort of story. Fair enough. But I love reading responses from people who get it.
Yeah.
It was rubbish to edit because there's a lot of poetic mechanics in the
sentence
structure.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that last time.
So every time I changed a word, I had to look for all the alliterations. But anyway, so I can be found online far more than I should be on it. Tan or Del is the name I go by a lot online. Although if you search Kathleen Jennings... Do you want to spell that out as well? Yeah. I will. If you search Kathleen Jennings, you'll find me. But TANAUDEL, which is actually from a name from Diana Wynne Jones' novel, Diana Wynne Jones' novel, Fire and Hemlock.
Fire and Hemlock. Oh, yes.
So, Tan or Del on Twitter, on Facebook, on Tumblr when I remember to log in again, on Instagram.
Yeah.
You can find me. And then I have a blog, which is tanordel.wordpress.com, and my portfolio is kathleenjennings.com, and they should cross-link to each other.
Awesome.
And just generally chatting to other people around corners of the internet.
Yeah. All right, we'll get you back to the convention.
To my fairy tale panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And, okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Harry Spiteri Show. And yeah, Kathleen's book Flyaway is available for purchase now, and you can get it from all the usual bookstores online. And the audio version's great too. And yeah, I hope you picked up some good tips and have some new creative prompts to try and different ways to get yourself into the groove, and enjoy the rest of your day. Catch you later.